What happens when a quiet night of babysitting turns into a full-blown nightmare? When a stranger calls, follows Jill Johnson, an ordinary high school student who just wants to make some extra cash by watching a couple of kids for the evening. Sounds easy, right? A big fancy house, sleeping kids, and a phone to keep her company. What could possibly go wrong? Well, everything. So grab some popcorn, turn down the lights, and maybe keep your phone silent because once the calls start, there's no hanging up. Let's dive straight in. The movie opens with a nighttime view of a carnival. Kids are laughing, rides are spinning, and everything seems cheerful until the camera slowly pans toward a house nearby. We see the shadow of a man standing by a window. Suddenly, a loud scream cuts through the noise, but the carnival music and crowd drown it out. No one notices. The next morning, Officer Lewis receives a report about a murder. Detective Hines is called in to help with the case. On their way to the scene, Hines asks Lewis what kind of weapon the killer used. Lewis says there were no weapons. Hines seems oddly familiar with the situation and says he's seen cases like this before. Lewis looks surprised. How could a detective see this many times before and still have no idea who the killer is? When they arrive, the murder scene is gruesome. 3 children and their babysitter, all dead. The movie then cuts to Fernhill High School, where we meet Jill, your typical American high school girl from the track team. Sporty, moody, and a little attitude-driven. After practice, she meets up with her best friend Scarlett. Jill tells her she can't go to the bonfire party that night because she has to babysit as punishment for spending too much time on her phone, which apparently caused her parents some financial trouble. That evening, while everyone else is heading to the bonfire, Jill's dad, Ben, drives her to the house where she'll be babysitting. They drive along a quiet mountain road surrounded by trees. Ben tries to talk to her about making hard decisions as a parent, but Jill mostly ignores him. He's clearly trying to connect, but she's not in the mood. They arrive at the Mandrakis family's mansion, a huge, luxurious home that looks like something out of a movie. Jill can't help but be impressed. Still, it's pretty isolated, and honestly, not the kind of place you'd want to be alone in at night with no cell reception. Jill's dad really wanted to punish her, it seems, and so he chose that one house that was so far away from the city that if she got into trouble, she won't be able to call for help. That man really hated his daughter, it seems. Dr. Mandrakis greets them at the door and introduces Jill to his wife, Kelly. Kelly gives Jill a quick tour of the house, pointing out the rooms, the emergency contact list by the phone, and the alarm system. She also mentions their maid, Rosa, who lives upstairs and says their college-age son stays in a guest house near the lake. Before leaving, Dr. Mandrakis sets the house alarm and tells Jill not to worry, which, of course, is exactly what she ends up doing. After they leave, Jill sits in the living room, bored. Eventually, she wanders around the house and sneaks into the parents' bedroom. She tries on some of Kelly's jewelry and looks through her things but stops when she hears a door creak. Startled, she rushes back to the couch and pretends to be reading. She assumes it's just the maid moving around, but then she spots Rosa outside in the greenhouse feeding the birds. So, who opened that door? Before she can think about it much, the alarm suddenly goes off. Jill quickly runs to the control panel and enters the code to turn it off. Moments later, Kelly calls her. The alarm company had contacted them. Kelly asks if the kids woke up, but Jill says they're still asleep. Kelly tells her not to wake them because they've been sick. Yeah, ignore the alarm of a remote house and worry about some sick kids. Sounds completely reasonable. Jill hangs up, feeling uneasy. The house is too quiet, too far away, and way too big. A few minutes later, the phone rings again. A man's voice asks if everything is okay, but before Jill can respond, he hangs up. Confused, she grabs a fireplace poker, her only weapon, and checks the kitchen and garden. No one's there. The phone rings again. At this point, any sane person would stop answering, but Jill picks it up anyway. Right then, her friend Tiffany shows up unexpectedly, hoping to convince Jill to sneak out and come to the bonfire. Jill refuses, not wanting to get in more trouble. She tells Tiffany to go home. As Tiffany walks to her car, a large tree branch suddenly blocks her path. She tries to move it, but before she can, something attacks her. Back inside, Jill hears loud knocking on the front door. She opens it, but no one's there. Creeped out, she locks all the doors, sets the alarm again, and sits down, terrified. The phone rings this time. It's Tiffany's number. Jill answers, but instead of her friend, a man speaks. That's when she realizes something is seriously wrong. Panicking, Jill calls Kelly and leaves a voicemail, asking her to call back immediately. Then she finally calls the police and reports the strange calls. The officer tells her to stay calm and keep the doors locked. While on the phone, Jill spots Rosa's car outside and assumes she's back, which gives her a small sense of relief. But she hadn't actually seen Rosa for over an hour. The officer stays on the line, asking questions about the calls. Jill explains that the man never says much, just asks if everything's okay. The officer tells her they'll trace the next call if she keeps him on the line long enough. After getting another strange call, Jill tries calling Rosa, the maid. She follows the sound of Rosa's phone ringing and finds it in the laundry room inside Rosa's bag. That's when Jill realizes something's wrong. Rosa's phone is here, but Rosa isn't. She turns the phone off, feeling uneasy. Just then, the man calls again. This time he says, "Have you checked the children?" Jill freezes. It's creepy, but honestly, you can't help thinking how different this would play out today. If this happened with Gen Z, the killer would probably get blocked or roasted in the group chat. Freaked out, Jill rushes upstairs to check on the kids. They're still asleep, thankfully. She quickly closes all the curtains in the house, trying to shake the feeling that someone's watching her. Then she calls the police to report the calls. The officer tells her to stay calm and keep the man on the line for at least 60 seconds next time, so they can trace the call. As Jill hangs up, she glances outside and spots a reflection in the guest house window. She decides to check it out, which, let's be honest, is not the smartest idea when you think someone might be stalking you. She walks over anyway and finds the place empty. Suddenly, the phone in the guest house starts ringing. She answers and manages to keep the man talking long enough for the trace, but it doesn't help because the call came from a different number this time. Jill looks up and notices that the light in Rosa's room is on, hoping maybe Rosa's back. She runs back to the main house. The phone rings again. She picks up and demands to know why the man keeps calling. The voice on the other end quietly says, "Your blood, all over me." Jill freezes again, but before she can react, the phone rings once more, and this time, it's the police. They tell her the trace worked, and the call is coming from inside the house. Jill doesn't even get to hear the rest of their instructions before she notices Tiffany's body on the floor, motionless, her phone still ringing. Jill starts to panic. She rushes upstairs to the children's room, but the kids aren't there. They're hiding in the playroom. Jill finds them and tells them to stay quiet. Then she looks up and nearly screams when she sees a man watching them from the ceiling. Now think about it. The alarm had already gone off earlier, meaning the intruder was probably inside the house the whole time. But instead of attacking, he decided to make creepy phone calls and hide in the ceiling. That's a lot of unnecessary effort for a murderer. At this point, you really have to wonder what's wrong with this guy. Jill quickly locks the playroom door and tells the kids to escape through the window that leads to the greenhouse. They climb out while she keeps watch. Once they're outside, Jill turns on the sprinklers to make it harder for the intruder to see them through the glass. Then she tells the kids to hide while she hides under the water. Not her best plan, but she's doing her best under pressure. As she hides, Jill suddenly notices Rosa's body underwater. It's horrifying, and she tries not to scream. Just then, the intruder enters the greenhouse. The sprinklers stop, and everything goes quiet. One of the kids accidentally steps on a rock, making a loud noise. The man immediately looks in their direction. The kids try to run to the locked door but can't open it in time. The stranger lets the kids run away, focusing instead on finding Jill. He spots her underwater and reaches for her, but Jill quickly flips over a small bridge, causing him to fall into the pool. For a second, it seems like she's escaped. Jill runs back into the house to look for the children and finds them hiding in the fireplace. Not the safest spot, but at least they're alive. She grabs them and leads them toward the front door. Just as they're about to escape, the stranger appears again and slams the door shut. The chase continues up the stairs. The man grabs Jill's leg, pulling her down, but she fights back. In a panic, she grabs the fireplace poker and stabs his hand. He screams and lets go. Jill doesn't waste a second. She runs outside with the kids and straight into the arms of a police officer who just arrived. The officer assures her that she's safe now. He says there are more police nearby who will handle the intruder. Jill and the children are taken away, finally out of danger. A few days later, we see Jill in the hospital, recovering from the terrifying night. Her dad is by her side, looking worried. Jill wakes up in a panic, screaming, clearly traumatized by everything that happened. The doctors and her father try to calm her down, but it's clear she's deeply shaken.